In the heart of World War II, a moment came that teetered on the edge of altering history's course. The day Adolf Hitler should have died. This day is one of World War II's most gripping what-ifs, where courage and conviction met with the harsh realities of a dictator's luck and the unyielding grip of his terror regime. A group of high-ranking German officers, along with influential civilians, had put together a plan to kill Hitler. On July 20th, 1944, the conspirators put their plan into action. A briefcase bomb, placed cunningly close to Hitler during a military briefing at the Lair, his heavily fortified headquarters in East Prussia, was set to eliminate the architect of the Holocaust and potentially bring an early end to the European war. The explosion tore through the room, killing and maiming. The plot has come to be known as Operation Valkyrie, but actually, the plotters didn't have a name for their plans. Valkyrie, Valkyrie in German, was the name of a German military contingency plan if communications between Hitler and the military were cut off. It involved a temporary military takeover of essential buildings, organizations, etc., until communications with the Führer or his headquarters could be re-established. Leading the plot was Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, the scion of an old German military and aristocratic family. From the Middle Ages, noble aristocratic families ruled Germany, or their parts of it. Before 1871, when Germany unified under the Hohenzollerns of Prussia, various noble families ruled in what were sometimes hundreds of principalities. The Stauffenbergs had lands throughout what became Germany, but their ancestral home was in the state of Baden-Württemberg, near Stuttgart. Near the Stauffenberg lands was a swathe of territory controlled by what eventually became the German royal family, the Hohenzollerns. Klaus von Stauffenberg's family was, in almost every way, near the top of German society for hundreds of years. Military duty was expected of every able-bodied Stauffenberg son, and Klaus joined the military in 1930. His two brothers, Alexander and Berthold, would also serve in the army during World War II, and Berthold would take his part in the plot to kill Hitler and pay for it with his life. Many German aristocrats served in the German army in both world wars and before, and even after military service continued to be involved in public affairs, sometimes on a national level. Duty to the country came first. What was the goal of the men who organized what became known as Operation Valkyrie? Firstly, not all of them wanted Hitler dead. Some believed that he should be put on trial so that all Germans could understand what was done in their name. But as the war went on and the killing in the extermination camps did as well, more came to believe that Hitler had to die. Not only Hitler, but SS Chief Himmler and Luftwaffe leader and economic chief Hermann Goering had to die at the same time because they each commanded vast and powerful forces. Stauffenberg was one of the most vocal and convincing voices urging Hitler's death. He argued that even if Germany were to be conquered, history should record that some Germans took action against evil. Suppose they succeeded in killing Hitler and were able to make peace with the Allies, at least the Western allies of the United States and Great Britain. In that case, they could focus and reinforce Germany's efforts to defend against the massive Soviet Red Army bearing down on their country. However, most historians agree that even if the attempt had succeeded, there was no way any of the Allies would have agreed to the terms Stauffenberg and the others planned to propose. There had already been several attempts on Hitler's life. We know there were at least 5 assassination plans developed and attempted by the July 20th plotters. There were also a half a dozen or more attempts on Hitler's life carried out by civilians. But among the military, all of the men who attempted to kill Hitler were of the German aristocracy. Major General Henning von Tresckow carried out the most well-known in March 1943, when Hitler visited Smolensk on the Russian front to meet with his generals and their staffs there. Tresckow put a plan into action. He disguised a bomb as a bottle of Cointreau, an after-dinner liqueur, and told another officer returning to Germany with Hitler that he owed a fellow officer back home a bet. Could he possibly see that he got it? A 30-minute fuse had already been set, but the bomb never went off. The cold temperatures in the unheated plane caused it to malfunction. Tresckow was one of the leading recruiters of the plot, and in August 1943 he met Stauffenberg back in Germany with the object of recruiting him. Stauffenberg was still recovering from severe wounds sustained in an Allied air attack in North Africa. He had lost his eye, his entire right hand, and 2 fingers on his left. Stauffenberg had also seen duty on the Eastern Front from Poland into the Soviet Union. He had seen firsthand, and had talked to many others who had seen firsthand, the atrocities the Nazis were committing. The mass killing of Jews, the tens and eventually hundreds of thousands of Polish civilians worked to death or shot by the Nazis, and the atrocities that took place in the USSR every day. Stauffenberg was not a liberal man, and like many of the others involved in the plot, believed not only that the war against the Soviets should continue and that Poland should be incorporated into Germany, but the Count drew the line at the mass extermination of civilians, whether it was Jews or anyone else. He was determined to act, not only to be able to live with his conscience, but to enable history to record that Germans had put an end to Nazi brutality. From the start, Stauffenberg took over. Despite his wounds, he was full of energy. Physically, he was tall, lean, and handsome, with an aristocratic bearing, and he was highly educated and a convincing speaker. Before Hitler came to power, Klaus and his brothers, like quite a few aristocrats, were members of some very elite intellectual circles, and the topic of discussion was often Germany's place in the world, its history, and its future. His family background, appearance, vitality, education, and determination won over many men, and a small number of women, involved in his high-ranking anti-Hitler circle. Initially, Treschow was supposed to plant another bomb, but he was sent back to the Eastern Front before the plans were fleshed out. Despite his new physical limitations, Stauffenberg believed he could arm a timed pencil fuse into two 1-kilogram plastic explosive blocks in his briefcase. Stauffenberg would be carrying a briefcase because connections within the resistance circle had gotten him appointed as an aide to fellow conspirator, later turned traitor to the cause, General Friedrich Fromm, commander of the Home Army, the army units within Germany whose job was to quell the uprisings or disturbances happening within Germany's borders, a critical position and central to the plotters' plans. Fromm or his aides attended briefings with Hitler regularly. On July 20th, 1944, Fromm's representative, Stauffenberg, was required to be present at the Wolfschanz, the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's heavily guarded and fortified East Prussian headquarters. When Stauffenberg and his aide, Lieutenant Werner von Haeften, arrived in East Prussia from Berlin at around 12:30 p.m. on July 20th, he was already running late. Being tardy worked in his favor, for although the briefing had already begun, he begged off entering the room with Hitler to change his shirt, which was soaked in sweat in the July heat. He told the guards that he needed von Haeften to go with him due to his disabilities, and the two went into a nearby room to change shirts and arm the fuses for the bomb. Stauffenberg and Haeften only had time to place the fuse in one of the explosive blocks. Haeften took the other and put it in his own briefcase. It was a close call. After a few minutes, a guard began to loudly knock on the door, insisting that the men come out, and for Stauffenberg to attend the briefing with Hitler, as well as 24 others, ranging from leading field marshals to aides like Stauffenberg. Hastily putting himself together, Stauffenberg, holding his briefcase by its modified handle to make it easier for the wounded man to grip, entered the room with Hitler and some of the leading military men in Germany. Because of his injuries and trouble seeing, he was allowed to take a position close and just to the right of Hitler. As the briefing continued, he casually placed the briefcase under the large map table. There was nothing between it and Hitler. As long as the fuse worked, and Stauffenberg knew it would, Hitler was a dead man. Stauffenberg had about 10 minutes to leave the briefing room before the bomb went off, and shortly after entering, a guard came in and notified him that he had an important call from Berlin, which had been prearranged. Two things saved Hitler's life. The first reason is well known. A nearby officer, Colonel Heinz Brandt, moved Stauffenberg's briefcase from one side of the massive table leg, or supporting beam, to the other. When the bomb went off, the table shielded Hitler from the main force of the blast, giving him only minor injuries but killing 4 others immediately. 3 other men died later. The rest of the men in the room suffered a variety of injuries, ranging from minor to traumatic. The 3 highest-ranking men at the conference, Field Marshals Alfred Jodl, Wilhelm Keitel, and capable General Walter Warlimont, also survived. The other reason Hitler survived was that the location of the meeting had been changed that morning. Initially, it was to take place in a strongly fortified bunker, but the heat and humidity inside were unbearable, so it was moved to a wooden cabin, sometimes used by Hitler's architect and Minister of Munitions, Albert Speer, who was not present that day. Had the explosions been confined in that reinforced concrete space with nowhere to go, not even through blast-proof doors, Hitler likely would have died instantly. 2 small decisions changed the course of history. The bomb went off at 12:42 p.m. The explosion occurred as Stauffenberg and his aide walked to a staff car to escape. They saw and heard the explosion and saw bodies being blown through the air. Stauffenberg was 100% sure that Hitler was dead. In the confusion, Stauffenberg and Haeften escaped in the staff car. They were seen speeding away by a guard who, at the time, believed they would get help. When he reported what he had seen sometime later, no one was in any doubt that Stauffenberg had planted the bomb. As they sped through the woods, leading to and from the Wolf's Lair, Haeften threw the explosives he still had in the woods, and the pair bluffed their way through 3 checkpoints to a waiting plane. Stauffenberg was already in Berlin, not far from the Wolf's Lair, when news of the explosion began to be reported on the radio. Though initial reports were not optimistic, no one said anything firm about Hitler being dead. What was supposed to happen once Hitler was killed? Operation Valkyrie, the real Valkyrie, involved the home army under Fromm to seize as much of the Nazi hierarchy as it could, with the excuse that it was them, not members of the army, that had carried out the bombing. Himmler, Göring, and Goebbels were the prime targets for capture or death. The most important buildings, including SS barracks and others, like radio transmitters, etc., were to be seized, and the German police were replaced by the military, at least for a short time. Similar actions were to be carried out throughout the country, and in some places the army rounded up, disarmed, and imprisoned members of the SS and the Gestapo. When he returned to Berlin, Stauffenberg, as General Fromm's aide, issued orders for Valkyrie in the general's name. Some units obeyed the orders, and some commanders were suspicious and did not. Unfortunately, Hitler was not dead, and as soon as he had recovered enough from the blast, he got on the phone. The most crucial man he called was not Himmler, but a major commanding the Home Army detachment in Berlin, Otto Remmer. Hitler asked if Remmer recognized his voice and told him, obviously, that he was alive. He then ordered Remmer to arrest Stauffenberg and others who had already been under suspicion for some time. By late afternoon, General Fromm, whose office in the Benderblock headquarters complex in Berlin was not far from where Stauffenberg and others were issuing orders for Valkyrie, had spoken to his superior, Field Marshal Keitel, at Wolf's Lair. Keitel assured Fromm that Hitler was alive. He then ordered a couple of men to accompany him and attempted to arrest Stauffenberg and General Friedrich Olbricht, another prominent resistance figure. This did not succeed, and Fromm and his men were disarmed and placed in a locked closet until Stauffenberg, Olbricht, Lieutenant von Heften, and another conspirator, Colonel Albrecht von Kirnheim, were arrested by troops under Major Remmer. Immediately after being freed by Remmer's men, Fromm ordered the immediate execution of Stauffenberg, Olbricht, and the other two officers. They were taken out to a courtyard and executed by firing squad. Stauffenberg was shot last because Heften had jumped in the way of the bullet meant for him. Stauffenberg's last words were, "Es lebe das Heilige Deutschland," sacred Germany lives. Within days, sometimes just hours, the Gestapo and the SS rounded up many suspected conspirators. Overwhelming and excruciating torture, ranging from beatings to electric shock and waterboarding, got the names of many of the leading figures of the plot, as well as some not directly involved in any way, including many innocent family members. One of the most famous was Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, who had known in a very general way of a plot but had not endorsed it, but who also didn't report it. He was forced to take poison in return for his family to be left alone. Many others were captured, tortured, and tried in infamous show trials run by the notoriously fanatical Nazi judge Roland Friesler. Many of those executed were, on Hitler's orders, made to suffer. Most of the plotters were held at Plötzensee prison in Berlin, where many, including Berthold and Stauffenberg, were hung from ropes and sometimes piano wire from large hooks in the ceiling, then taken down before death, only to be put through the experience many more times until they finally died. Many of the hangings were filmed for Hitler's viewing. Today, a large room of the still-functioning Plötzensee prison where the conspirators were hanged is a national memorial, as is the spot on Bendlerstrasse where Klaus von Stauffenberg, Friedrich Olbricht, von Heften, and Kirnheim were shot. This is History on Fleek. See you next time.